Our grand Australian and New Zealand tour started on August 15th, 2014. A 26-hour travel day took us to Melbourne, Australia. We got pajamas from the airlines. Melbourne is very pretty. The old and new buildings, contemporary designs, and a little humor go all together. Cam and I like museums, and this town has an excellent natural history museum. We were to find that the entire continent is a remarkably preserved museum. Chinatown, Irish pubs, lots of wildlife, art, graffiti, old churches are there too. Day 3, we fly to the outback. Australia is about the same size as the United States. A 3-hour flight from Melbourne to Alice Springs for lunch, and a second 2-hour flight took us to the deep outback. It's hard to describe the desolation that is the outback. In the middle of nowhere, there's a monolith called Uluru. Stone Mountain near Atlanta, Georgia is a monolith. When Lieutenant James Cook claimed Australia for the British in 1770, the indigenous people watching the proceedings were called Aborigines. For the next 200 years, the Aborigines were not treated as human beings and did not forcibly resist their treatment. As late as 1928, a white man brought before a court for killing an Aborigine man told the judge that he did not know it was against the law to kill an Aborigine. The lives of the current Aborigines are markedly better, but not anywhere near equal opportunity. Cam and I had a chance to talk to a young native. He admitted that Aborigines have a cultural problem with concepts like math, but were good with hands-on learning and work. He was learning to be a masseur and was planning to come to America. Aborigine art and music, and now some entry labor jobs, produce the incomes needed for survival. Day 5, we fly to Cairns and the Great Barrier Reef. On day number 5, a 3-hour flight took us from the desolation of the desert outback to a beachfront hotel in the rainforest that is northeast Australia. We check into individual cabins on the beach. The hotel dining room does not have any walls. It is tropical and there are no bugs. The next day we travel 30 miles out in the Coral Sea to part of the 1,200-mile-long Barrier Reef. From the stationary platform there were several ways to get underwater without getting wet. One is a walkway under the platform. There was also a semi-submersible boat that drove out among the fishes and coral. Snorkeling in ultralight swim gear to protect from the tropical sun and jellyfish, there was none that day, gave us a better look at the coral and the fish. But the very best way was scuba diving. Thanks to Larry McHale, we all got to see pictures of what he saw. Simply beautiful. The next morning, day number 6 of the 21-day tour, took us above the rainforest in a gondola ride. A park ranger led us to many spectacular sights and provided some history of working and living in the rainforest. We stopped for lunch at a crocodile farm. A crocodile, of course. The next morning wake-up call was at 3:30 to allow us to catch the sunrise from the basket of a hot air balloon.
You're on television.
Makes me look important. I have no idea what they actually do. I'm getting so on the side of the balloon there's 2 holes. Not bad for no wheels, eh?
Here we go.
You're enjoy that?
Oh, yes. I want to go back up.
Great.
I want more.
There comes the vehicle.
What's happening is the second group came in this trailer and they're taking one person off and putting one person on to keep the weight balanced to keep the balloon on the ground.
Hope you got home.
Come back. I don't know.
Tuck your heels together. Look at the kids. No place like home.
That afternoon, we catch a 3-hour flight to Sydney and the Sydney Opera House. On Sunday, August 24th, we flew from the rainforest in the northeast to Sydney in the southeast. Port Jackson, better known as Sydney Harbour, is considered one of the world's finest. Early reports back to England said that 1,000 ships of the line may ride there in perfect security. Our marvelous tour director labeled the harbour bridge as a suspended arch. As a former bridge designer, I argued that an arch is not suspended, the roadway is suspended. A little research in one of the biggest bookstores I have ever seen explained the remarkable engineering feat that in 1930 built this bridge. I was right about the suspended arch comment, but I got regulated to the back of the bus anyway. On Monday morning, August 25th, 2014, a short walk from our hotel brought us to the remarkable Sydney Opera House. The Sydney Opera House has about 1,000 rooms, including 5 theaters, 5 rehearsal studios, and 2 main halls. The roofs of the house are constructed of 1,056,000 glazed white granite tiles, imported from Sweden, and are self-cleaning. After our private tour, we boarded a sailing catamaran cruise ship for a harbor tour and lunch. Note the yellow water taxis waiting at the dock where we offloaded to a motor coach for a tour of the eastern suburbs. $1-million homes everywhere. Then a stop at Bondi Beach. Always popular, surfing, sunning on beamy days, and a motor coach emptied when the clothing optional culture was mentioned. A historical picture shows what we all had in mind. However, the damn beach was almost empty that day. The next day, Cam and I went separate ways. I opted for a visit to the Maritime Museum. Cam signed on for the foodie tour. After seeing pictures of the foodie tour, I have no idea how the plane got off the ground the next morning to fly to Wellington, New Zealand. Day 11 of our tour starts with a 3-hour flight from Sydney, Australia to Wellington, New Zealand. Situated at the southern end of the North Island, Wellington was recently named the coolest little capital in the world by Lonely Planet. Our hotel faces Oriental Bay and is in walking distance to the Central Business District. Sailing, standing, surfboarding, racing shell, seawater, kayaking, beautiful walks are just outside our front door. The next morning includes a tour of the city and a visit to the Parliament buildings. The round building is called the Beehive. We board the cable car up the hill to Kelburn and the amazing views of the city. We ride a motor coach down to the sea through a park. Springtime is just starting. The last stop of the day is a private tour of the National Museum. On the walk back to dinner, we get a picture of some street sculpture. You had to walk around back to see that it's Wellington's version of a public toilet. The next day we are to fly to the South Island for a cruise on the Marlborough Sound. A 30-minute flight from Wellington brings us to Blenheim on the South Island. Marlborough is famous for their production of Sauvignon Blanc. A short motor coach ride brings us to our boat. Beautiful day. On the way out into the Sound, we see quite a few isolated cabins or homes. A mussel farm is surveyed underwater piece of land. Tide, current, water quality, location, depth, and so forth sets the market price for the underwater farmland. Each buoy has ropes attached to them to which microscopic mussels are attached. Note the green lips of the mature mussels. The captain shows us how to eat the mussels. They are big and are marketed for both medicinal value as well as food value. Lunch is mussels, salmon, slow-cooked ham, more mussels, more wine, a really good lunch with many new friends in a beautiful part of the world. All too soon, we are on our way back to the dock to our late afternoon flight to Tianu, the gateway to the Milford Sound. On day 14 of our 21-day trip, it's Sunday, August 31st, 2014, a late afternoon flight from Blenheim near the Marlborough Sound brought us to Tianu, a small town in the southern part of the South Island. Our motel is on the Tianu Lake, surrounded by snowy mountains. Tianu is a gateway to the Milford Sound. The Milford Sound was described by Rudyard Kipling as the eighth wonder of the world. The Milford Sound was carved by glaciers during the Ice Ages. The drive through the mountains to get to our boat had spectacular views. Mirror Lake was a stop to get pictures of the mountains reflecting off the high mountain lake. Setting out on the Sound, we were immediately confronted with towering, snow-covered mountains, waterfalls, deep blue waters, more waterfalls, more snowy mountains. It never stopped. All too soon, we are back in our dock and on our way back to Tianu. On day 15, Monday, September 1st, 2014, we depart Tianu by motor coach to the adventure capital of New Zealand, Queenstown, for a 3-night stay. For lunch, we stopped at the Amasfield Winery. Wine tasting was included in the lunch. The second round was very expensive, however. One table said they paid $80 for a bottle. The next morning started with a 2-hour ride up a steep and narrow road to ride a Skipper Canyon jet boat. This is an Aussie-designed jet boat. We traveled upstream for a mile or so in shallow and fast-running water, did a fast 180-degree turn, and then sped downstream at 50 miles an hour, missing the rocks on each side by inches. Exciting. A helicopter ride takes us to the top of Bob's Peak above Queenstown. No one seems to know who Bob was. Before the gondola ride back to town, there were a number of activities on Bob's Peak to choose from. Tandem parachute jumping, bungee jumping, paragliding, hiking, or just admiring the view on another very beautiful day. The future chief of our newly formed tribe, 92-year-old Dick Spear, did the zipline trek down to the town. He was the oldest to ever do this here. He did not really ride upside down, did he, Linda? The following day we boarded the steamship Earnslow, built at the same time as the Titanic. At the Walter Peak sheep station, we saw a dog herding sheep and sheep shearing. Lunch and the ride back ended the day's activities. Dinner for us included green-tipped mussels and oysters. The last 3 days of our 21-day tour were somewhat disappointing. A 2.5-hour flight from Queenstown to Rotorua to visit the Te Puia Maori Cultural Center, and then a 2-hour motor coach ride to Auckland took up the first day. For 600 years, the Te Arura tribe has lived in an area of bubbling mud pools, shooting geysers, and natural hot springs. We were greeted formally. Our elected chief, the zipline master from Queenstown, rubbed noses with their chief as a sign of peaceful intentions. After a tour of the village, the carving school, and the basket weaving school, we left for Auckland. On the way, we stopped at a traditional New Zealand dairy farm for lunch. The owner said he had 267 cattle and that it took one man to milk all of them in an hour. I would have loved to see the milking process. How can one man herd almost 300 cows, connect them to mechanical extraction devices, and drain them of milk in 1 hour may have been the highlight of the entire trip. Our hotel in Auckland was in a red light district. We were warned not to walk on Queen Street, so even a little exercise was out of the question. Take 50 years off each of our lives and even a reservation at a look but don't touch nightclub might have even been better than watching the cow milking process. The last day, we took a ferry to Waiheke Island, visited an olive farm, had lunch in a winery, and saw some million-dollar homes. We met for a farewell reception that evening. That was pretty cool. The next morning, we shuttled to the airport and the 25-hour trip back to the USA.